if you can give an overview of the industry size and what are the market dynamics, and when we compare the Indian market to the rest of the world, right? So where does it stand primarily?
Yes, so if you talk about the private tuition market worldwide, I'm talking about worldwide, it is somewhere around $200 billion industry. So it is a huge industry. Now, if we just talk about the private tutoring market in India, today it is not that developed as it can be in future, but still it is $25 billion. And out of this, if you're talking about private test prep market in India, again, it is somewhere around $10 billion. It is expected to grow at $30 billion by 2025.
Hi, Shival. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. How are you?
Great, 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 great. Right. So before we get into the discussion, let me set the context and the pace of the session today, right? So today we'll be talking about AI-enabled personalized learning, right? And today we have Mr. Shival, who is the founder and CEO at Pracbee, right? So before we get into the discussion, I would like to know more about your journey, how you started the firm, and if you can shed some light over there, it will be great.
Yes. So the journey of Pracbee started in the COVID times.
Right.
At COVID times, I have been a teacher for almost 11 years of my life now.
Okay.
And in that 11 years, I had different kind of experiences, different batch sizes, etc. I taught. Mostly in IIT-JEE segment, I taught mathematics.
Correct.
So when the COVID was happening, all of a sudden, we all offline teachers were expected to become online teachers.
Right.
So it was a huge transition that was taking place, and the students were facing huge problem.
Correct.
Why? Because there was no sense of connectivity between the students and teachers.
Right.
And at the same point of time, there were online solutions also available for students. But the problem with those solutions were again, the connectivity was still less in that, because there a teacher was teaching probably hundreds and thousands of students.
Correct. Correct.
At that point of time, because I was reflecting on my journey as a teacher and a student, because I have been a teacher for 11 years and then as a student of classical music for around 10 years.
Amazing.
So reflecting both the ideas that how my life is under a Indian Gurukul system, where I'm totally in touch with my teacher. My teacher knows each and everything out of my life, and whether personal or professional, everything he's accustomed with everything, that how am I thinking and what is happening in my life and my overall development as such. But wherein the kind of treatment I'm giving to my students is not the same. And therein we started on reflecting whether the kind of education that we are giving in the current environment that we have, it is suitable for the students or not.
Correct.
And then I realized that the problem has always been there. It is not that the problem has just started because of the COVID. It has always been there, but it is just that it was under the wraps. Now, since COVID is there, it is more visible to everybody that there is no connection as such. But earlier also, when we were teaching, the problem of connection was still there, because you're teaching 100, 200 students in a batch.
Correct. Correct.
And there is no connectivity, because you cannot have a discussion in the class. When I used to learn in my Gurukul, basically there was a huge connect between my teacher and me, because we are having a lot of discussions in the classes, which are related, because I'm learning music, so it is related to mostly music, how musicians think and what are the problems they face and how to overcome those problems. But such discussions are never happening in my maths class.
Right. Right.
So there is a huge gap between eventually it is not the content that will make you successful. Content is important. We all understand the importance of content, but ultimately it is the person you're carving out of a student that is going to become successful or unsuccessful at the end of the day. Right. So that was the central theme, that we wanted to make system things that should ultimately enhance the connection that a student is feeling with his faculty or the system. And there should be an inherent tool in this, could be the discussion that we are talking about. That becomes a connection, and through which we are able to transfer not just the content, but our life experience as well. And what is required in a student in order to get to that level. Now, wherein what kind of personality traits he needs to have in order to develop that kind of, or have that kind of success in life.
Correct. Correct.
Got it. So we thought about a model, basically that could be something new in education as such. So we thought about basically having discussion-based classes.
Correct.
Hmm.
Correct.
And since we are all engineers, I am from IIT Delhi, other two founders, Gaurav is also from IIT Delhi, Mohan is my roommate from IIT Delhi. So we are basically engineers, so data is important to us somehow. So we were also very much motivated to have a look at what kind of data we are producing on a daily level if you're interacting with a student. And if we can study the right kind of data and the discussion that we are doing in the class, and we club it through mentoring, we have got a very good tool in order to mold the personality of a student and make him a winner.
Correct. Correct.
Got it? So now if you are trying to have a discussion, hold a discussion, it cannot happen in a group of 100 students. We need to have smaller groups.
Correct.
And once we have smaller groups, then the discussion can happen. I can ask a lot of questions to the student. Because usually what happens now is the classes are very unilateral. I will stand in front of a board and give a lecture for 1 hour. Then it is on the student to understand whatever they want to take out of it.
Correct.
But now what we are trying to do is basically in half of the class, the student should speak. So I am asking a lot of questions as a teacher that, okay, you understood this. Now you try and answer these questions. So it is not a straightforward spoon feeding method where you are giving everything to the student and then expecting them to mug something up and become something. See, mugging things up will not make you a different person. Thinking differently will make you a different person.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So through that discussion, we were able to bring that synergy up. And then the next idea was basically to have the right kind of data in place. Like, for example, a student says things like, I am working very hard. But how you define how much hours you're putting into it, where the time is going. Are you practicing? Are you reading the notes? Are you doing revision? What exactly are you doing out of it?
Correct. Correct.
Got it? Then you are we are talking about engineering exams and the entrance exams. The important data here would be basically how many questions you are practicing on a daily basis. Because at the end of the day, you have to go and write an exam. If we talk about main 75 questions, you have to solve in 3 hours, 180 minutes. And
Right.
then at the level of advanced, what you have to do is solve 120 questions in 6 hours. If you are really serious about your studies and you are thinking that I'm going to go to IITs, I will have to clear IIT-JEE Advanced. And therein, I have to solve 120 questions in 6 hours in order to reach there, right? So if I do not solve 120 questions on a daily basis, and I cannot be in a position wherein I can say that I am going to clear this exam.
Correct. Correct.
Because I will not have the stamina to sustain those 6 hours. And see, most of the students in India, across India, are thinking similarly, and they do not have enough practice. So we made this an experiment. We started with an experiment initially, a pilot, to first understand what kind of data we can generate about a student. So the first data that we thought very important is basically how many hours you're putting into very specific activities, like practice. Then what you are doing out of that, like how many questions you solved. Let us you set for 4 hours, how many questions you solved out of that. Now you have solved, let us say, 50 questions in 4 hours. So that data should be there, and the progression of data should happen in over a period of 1 year, 2 years. Then it makes sense.
Correct.
And then what are the outcomes that you're generating out of it in terms of results? Then once you have mastered it, now there should be some sense that you are doing some kind of revision also. So what time is going into revision? Is it happening regularly? So we are doing discussion-based classes, then working on this specific data in our mentorship system. So first you are training students, how to work on the quality aspects, then maintain the quantity aspects, so get into the right places.
Correct.
So that is how we started, and a small batches. The idea was to do only one-on-one, but we realized that 1:6 makes more sense. And we usually move towards 1:6 batches, teaching in very small batches in discussion-based mode, then having right kind of data in place, discussing, training students to think in the right direction in mentorship sessions.
Correct.
But ultimately we realize that this is a very, very manual process. If you're talking about teachers, you require very good quality teachers if you want to have a high quality discussion.
Correct.
Not everybody is able to hold a discussion with student. And therein we thought that now technology becomes more important somehow. So if we can somehow use a very good teacher, and this very good teacher can teach all the students in this discussion-based manner, and we have some digital mentor who can track the right kind of data. He can push the right kind of inputs at right point of time when the student is facing problem based on the data that we are generating. All of these things can be done using artificial intelligence.
Correct.
Got it. So
Right.
see, what we are trying to do is we are trying to do probably the same thing that probably people in India did thousands of years back. The same Gurukul kind of a pedagogy, we are trying to bring it back, where the learning is more personalized, more individual, and we are trying to develop the individual personality of a student. And we are not trying to put him into a rat race. But we are
Correct.
doing in such a manner that everybody's growth is tracked using very quantitative parameters.
Correct.
Got it. So now you understand that now if we look the whole problem from a global perspective, can you go to, in the starting when I used to take sessions, online sessions, I used to get students from Africa attending those sessions. And I used to think that why people from Nigeria, etc., are attending sessions which are meant for IIT-JEE. Then we realized that the problem of teacher is even more in those countries.
Correct.
As well. So the idea here is basically, if you think from a global perspective, you cannot have very good quality teachers overall, through and through. We cannot have such a small batches running in at a very high quality for a sustained period of time. And therein, your AI-led learning and teaching comes into picture. Wherein this one teacher is working using artificial intelligence in many batches.
Correct.
So you can optimize a very good teacher across multiple students, wherein the student is feeling that the teacher is only teaching him.
Right. Right. So over here, we are trying to reach masses, but not compromising on the quality of the learning, right? Is
Exactly.
what we are trying to do. Amazing.
Exactly. So see, what is happening in the market, if you see that tag, most of the people are working on the pricing point.
Correct.
They want to make it cheaper every day. They want to even do it in 1,000 rupees, let us say. But nobody is worried about the outcome. Because see, now let us see it from a family's point of view. Now, probably I'm one of a student who went into class 10 to 11th. And there are huge hopes to earn bread for the family. The fortune of the family actually depends on the success or failure of this student. All their hopes are pinned on the success or failure of that student. The parents' hopes and the relatives, etc. There is a lot of pressure that is going on. So now they cannot be of the mode that okay, out of every 100 students, 2 will get selected. For them, that is not an acceptable answer. They want, usually people in India, when they are writing any competitive exam, they want results. And the problem with the current attacks is basically they are trying to play on the price. Nobody is trying to play on the quality, whether the students are getting the right quality of education.
Correct. You rightly mentioned, right? So it's very important, I would say rather crucial to, focus on the quality and the quantifiable measures that we are tracking, right? So you also mentioned that you are tracking a lot of data pointers, which is really amazing in my opinion, right? And I feel that, it should be backed by data wherein we can quantify the results and the student can hence improve, right? So that's quite interesting, Shival, to be very honest. So that brings me to my next question for you, right? So if you can give an overview of the industry size and what are the market dynamics, and when we compare the Indian market to the rest of the world, right? So where does it stand primarily?
Yes, so if you talk about the private tuition market worldwide, I'm talking about worldwide, it is somewhere around $200 billion industry. Okay, so it is a huge industry. Now, if we just talk about the private tutoring market in India, today it is not that developed as it can be in future, but still it is $25 billion market. And out of this, if you're talking about private test prep market in India, it is somewhere around $10 billion. It is expected to grow at $30 billion by 2025. Okay, so what we're talking about is basically you're talking about 260 million students just in India. Out of which 50 million students are in grade 9 to 12. And here, 80% students are still attending private tuitions or coaching. And now there are also students, somewhere around 40 million students in the colleges. 10 million students preparing for different types of competitions, etc. So what I'm trying to tell you here is basically, if we look at education at a global level, it is a huge thing. And more importantly, if you look at India, most of the things are happening at the level of mass. We have mass coaching trend in India, wherein if you go to any kind of coaching for any competition exam, what is happening there, you will find 100 to 200 students sitting in an offline mode preparing. But if you look the same scenario at a global stage, most of the coaching that is happening is at a private level. if you're talking about developed countries, and if we again go to those countries which are still in the developing phase, and here there is a trend of less number of teachers and mass batches and a purchasing power, etc. But my idea is basically, if you can provide the same kind of solutions, and as student people are getting at not that at the same price point in offline, they can still go for quality solutions which can give them outcomes. The market in India is still going towards that direction, wherein people are thinking now of moving from a mass coaching to a non-mass coaching. The transition is happening in India. It has already happened to a certain extent in China, let us say. In Europe, if you talk about, there are one-on-one models that are still working there. But there are untapped markets like Africa is there. There are other countries in Asia that we can tap. So there is a huge potential that if we talk about from education point of view, and not just from test prep point of view. Now, if you analyze it from basically school tuitions, etc., there is again a huge market that is there. Then there are college tuitions. Students need help at the level of college also. So if you are talking about teaching and education, that is happening at a one-on-one level at a very effective manner, and that is trying to make a student a better student, the scope is huge.
Correct. So, rightly mentioned, right? So, Shival, what are the key driving factors for the whole e-learning industry, that are into the play?
So now if you talk about the whole e-learning industry, so it started way back with NIIT. And if you remember, that was probably the first tech of India. They started the whole trend. The idea, we were talking to the founder of NIIT, and his idea was that basically it should be like a vending machine. You put in the money and you get the product out of it, and it should be productized into that money. Again, everybody who is taking the, let us say, we put money into a vending machine and you take a chocolate out of it, every chocolate tastes the same. So that was their idea. Now, if you look at e-learning in India, now basically see, earlier it was a huge divide between e-learning and non-e-learning. Now, one trend that I'm understanding after COVID is basically people are not that averse to e-learning. Few of them had lemons, and let us, it is fair to say that few of them had very bad experience with online learning. The reason was that most of that learning was done by school teachers who were not comfortable with technology, who didn't understood even what is basically online learning. So that is the reason few of them had really bad experiences. But if you look, there are people also who had decent experiences, who understood that the outcomes in learning online can be as good as offline learning. And even if you look at the JEE scores, and at the time of COVID, it almost spiked as high as 50%. And that happened across many competition exams. So if actually it was that bad, why the papers became difficult and still the scores improved? So it is a testimony basically based on data that actually online worked to a certain extent. The only thing that a major part of it was done by untrained online teachers, with no clear guidelines how to go about it. And a large part of also it was done by people who had the idea of just delivering the content, not trying to build a connection with the student, not trying to improve a student, work on the basic personality traits of a student. So what I see is basically in future, e-learning will move in that direction. It is going to become more personalized. And it is going to talk about things which are going to improve the student outcomes. Because at this point of time, few edtech players can actually claim that they have some role in changing the outcomes of the student. Again, Pracbee is one of those students in which 80% students who came to us, who qualified for IIT-JEE Advanced, actually got into IITs. So we as a platform was able to make a difference in the outcomes of the student. But not many edtech players can actually say that they had some kind of outcome changing approach towards their online learning. So that is what I think, that in future, people, now they have accepted that online thing is going to be there. To what percentage? That is the question that everybody is asking basically. So what I think is basically it is going to play a big role. And the reason is that, see, a student, for example, let us say a student goes to Kota. He is leaving his family behind. A 10th class student who has no experience in handling his own finances, relations, social atmosphere. How to, there people are moving to different places to learn. The moving is basically happening because they do not have the right kind of facilities near their home. And if you talk about a city like Mumbai, a person has to take 2 or 3 locals to reach a place. Then again, it is a huge hassle if you talk about metro cities also to travel, and it is not always safe. And also, it is not monitored by a parent. You cannot trust a student who is as young as in class 10th. So you are wasting a huge amount of time and resources in doing things which are unproductive in nature. And from time point of view, it doesn't add up. A student is in the school for 8 hours, let us say. He is traveling for 2 hours in order to reach a coaching. He is studying 4.5 hours. And now see, if you take a whole day, he has spent most of his time into traveling and learning things. He has no time to practice. This is not going to give him any kind of outcomes. And that is happening with most of the students. They are not getting the outcomes out of it. And the traveling cost is huge, the accommodation cost is huge. And most of that money is going into making the infrastructure. See, if you're talking about learning, if the money goes to the teacher, we can actually invest on his skill set, the kind of teachers we are hiring. But if it goes into building and putting an AC or a building, no quality addition is actually happening in the kind of education we are going to deliver. And so that is actually happening if you talk about most of the offline coaching. Then that is the reason I think that if once the online coaching starts becoming more streamlined, more goal-oriented, more result-oriented, more personalized, people will move towards online learning. There is no way across it because you're saving tremendous amount of money, you are saving tremendous amount of time, you're getting better outcomes.
Correct. So you rightly mentioned, right? It's very important to put your money in and manage the time. And you rightly mentioned that being in a metro city, it's very difficult to utilize or maximize the throughput because most of the time goes into traveling and then learning. But the practicing bit is very important where the student actually learns, right? So that's very important, right? So that brings me to my next question, Shival. So what are the challenges faced by the consumers or the students rather? Although you covered it a bit in your previous points, but if you can shed some pointers as in what are the key challenges in your opinion that a student is facing today?
Yes. So the first challenge the student is facing is basically at the level of goal setting. Most of the students do not have a goal set. That's what exactly I want to do with my life. And see, that is happening because see now at our time probably, let us say a student used to know 1 or 2 fields. So if you have to make a career, you will make it in one of those fields because you have limited options. Okay, now the whole world is open to a student. When he goes to internet, he can also think about becoming a professional online gamer, which is like a very niche field. Then they can think about taking YouTube as a full-time career option. If we see 5 or 10 years back, such kind of options were neither available, nor people were actively talking about adapting those career options. Now I meet 5 to 10 students every day in that I have an open discussion with what they want to do with that career and they have different ideas about it. So see, our education system, if we are talking about online, also needs to be more diverse in order to take care of all those aspirations that they are having. It cannot be unidimensional like we have today. It needs to diverse in coming 5 to 10 years. So that is the first thing that I see. The second is basically, now once they have thought of certain career options, let us say that he wants to become an engineer. Now, most of the times they do not clearly understand that what an engineer is. So if I talk about engineer in one line, he's a problem solver. See, probably that student has never solved a puzzle in his life. And he wants to become an engineer. Now, see, you can clearly see that there is a cliche there. And the same is happening with most of the professions. So the student, because they have a notion of thing and then there are actual things, the real life that is out there. And so that is the divide that they face, and it is difficult to choose a career option. And it was also difficult at my point of time, probably for everybody it is difficult, but now it is becoming more challenging because you have more options. So to choose the right kind of guidance in order to move forward. And then there is a lot of marketing that is happening. See, online, the whole online revolution also came with this online marketing. And in that you can project anything out of proportion. You can produce, like, let us say, one good rank, and then you can say that this is the best institute in the country because we have produced all India rank. But the reality is that your only 1 to 2% students are actually getting selected. And the idea is that if you are, let us say there are 1,000 students in the center, you can actually count how many of them are actually going to get selected. Most of the students are not going to make it, and they do not understand the basic mathematics of it. So the kind of system that you're choosing, they need to understand that it needs to work for them. You need to have a connection with the faculty, because see, what is the fastest way of learning? It is basically copying the mindset of the person who is already experienced into that field. That is the easiest way. And then you experiment with that mindset and try to adapt that mindset according to you. And then it becomes your own mindset. But you have to develop this thinking process. So a system should be there and that develops the thinking process of a student. And I think that most of the mass systems that people are opting, because that has been a tradition in India, are not working for them. So that is another challenge the student is facing. He goes to a very famous mass coaching. And there he somehow feels that out of place. Because most of the content that is being delivered is delivered to figure out that one student who is going to be there in the advertisement next year. It is not suited to the student who's sitting in the class. He's feeling suffocated there. He feels that now I'm not going to make it. But probably that question that the teacher is trying to tell him is based for that one student who is going to be rank 1. But if you look at the stats, if you talk about the rank 1 in IIT-JEE, he scores 95% marks in IIT-JEE Advanced. The student who is in the top 1,000, who will also get a computer science branch, is scoring 60% marks. So you can see what a differential that is there. And probably a person who is going to make it to IITs, he only has to score 30% marks. So what I'm trying to tell you is basically you can still make it with whatever limited amount of intelligence you have. But what you require is not a system where you are bombarded with random content, but given something which is more suited to your need. And that is not happening. So that is another challenge. What happens is basically you keep, and at the end of the day, what happens is basically you are still struggling. And you have paucity of time. You do not have enough time to practice, and you do not have enough time to review. And the most disappointing part is you are still putting 12 to 15 hours into it. 8 hours of school, 4 hours of coaching. If you only add that, it becomes 12. You feel like I am giving whatever maximum I can give. And this is the same student who was there in class 10th. Right? He's the same student who was there in class 10. And this student in class 10th was doing like school and just 1 or 2 hours of study. And getting a 90 percentile. And he was very happy getting that beautiful A plus something grades. And all of a sudden you are struggling with everything. Even the school is not happening because even that is not getting practiced. Again, somehow if you do it, before the exam, you forget everything because you never revised.
Correct.
And then there is a huge pressure of the society and everybody who's constantly asking what kind of marks you got in the mock test paper. And then you realize somehow that probably you are not meant to become an engineer. That is the toughest part, because now you cannot communicate to anybody because you've invested so much of time, energy, and money into it.
Correct. Right. So that brings me to my next question, Shival. This is a very interesting one, right? So what is the solution that you are offering, and how is it different from other players who are out there in the market probably?
Yes. So see, what Pracbee is trying to do is basically we are trying to do discussion-based classes. What happens in the discussion-based classes, I'm not just delivering an answer to a question. What I'm doing is basically I'm teaching some content, then asking relevant questions so that the student thinks and the thinking process develops in the class. And after that, you are measuring the right kind of data, that what time is going where, trying to improve that data. Like for example, I'm practicing for 1 hour a day. If it becomes 2, my outcomes are going to become double. What kind of number of questions I'm solving on a daily basis. And then we are talking about what kinds of result that they're obtaining and how can we optimize that result. So that kind of work happens in a small system, cannot happen in a big system wherein you have hundreds of students in a class. And now our vision is basically to make it more versatile by including AI. So now we have our own testing platform into place, which generates a lot of insights. We are slowly moving towards developing our own AI simulated live learning program. Where the quality of teacher and the quality of learning will further improve.
Correct.
So it is significantly different. It is a result-oriented approach, where you are trying to get result for every student, wherein If you go into the market, the idea is basically to bring the cost down and or to make a lot of expenditures on marketing. You can have wherein the few ranks that you have got, you publish them in the newspaper. You not talk about the case studies wherein the students were unable to make it.
Correct, correct. So Shival, you have been into this market, and you also mentioned that you have experienced the Gurukul learning, and you might have seen the market evolve in past couple of years, right? So can you shed some light over there? What are the trends that you have seen in the market, and how it has evolved over the years?
Yes. So there have been a lot of trends that I will not say trends basically. What I can say is, so the trend that become very famous is basically now we can see that we have a system of online learning into place. It started somewhere around 2015. Especially learning through YouTube has become a mainstream phenomenon. And every student, whenever they are facing a doubt, they go to a YouTube and search for any teacher, and then they see the lecture, etc. So this has become a mainstream thing that I never thought would pick up, because there is no connection, nothing. So for getting that clarity, students usually rush to this platform. You can see now what I'm talking about is not all the trends are good. So this trend is fine, and it is a neutral trend. It's because it is giving you some positive content. But see, now has been another trend, like whenever we used to face a problem, a difficult question was given to us. It was given to develop our mindset, how we think. Now, what student does is basically they have this idea that they have a lot of data out there. That, for example, if I get 60% marks in the paper, I'm going to get into computer science and IITs. Now, this trend is with them. In order to become 60%, they take different kinds of ways to reach there. And they will go and seek solutions of all the difficult problems on the internet. Because a lot of people have made a huge depository of questions now. There are apps running on that idea. But the idea is that a doubt is there to develop you as a student, develop your thinking process. Doubts are not inherently bad.
Correct.
So what I think is basically one good is there, basically again one miss is there somehow. But I think that ultimately it is going to balance out somehow.
Correct. You rightly
And
mentioned.
the huge trend now I am seeing is basically in more personalized learning. People are now interested, and people who are learned and who understand the current ecosystem, who have understood, they have invested in their schooling, etc. They understand that mass systems do not usually give you answers or results. So now they are moving towards more personalized solutions in general. So I think this trend is going to remain.
Correct. You rightly mentioned that, personalized learning, some personal touch has to be there in order to, improvise or improve the learning outcome and so on and so forth that you mentioned, right? So that brings me to my very last question for you, Shival, for today, right? So where do you position yourself, rather, Pracbee, in next 3 years or so, maybe?
Yes. So what we are doing in Pracbee is now at this point of time, we started with the basic idea of mentoring students. And from there, we wanted to develop some kind of a learning platform. We can then ultimately realize that it is that discussion-based learning which actually produces the impact. So we are doing decently in this segment, and we definitely see ourselves growing in this segment wherein we are teaching in small batches with all the nitty-gritties that I have already explained to you. But apart from that, we are now heavily banking and moving towards AI-led learning. Where all of these things can happen in a batch of only one student in the absence of a teacher, and yet delivering the similar kind of outcomes. And this again has a huge scope in application, not just in test prep, but school learning. If you talk about other countries also, other models also. So once this model, which we have already, we have done a pilot over it, we have already a working prototype into place. Once we are able to develop this model can be applied across countries and different education systems, in test prep, in school education. So it is going to have a huge impact. So that is what we see Pracbee in future, developing that kind of impact with quality, not with compromising quality. We do not want to do anything. So quality is very important for Pracbee, and that we are going to make through now this AI-led model that we have come with.
Correct. So amazing work right there, Shival, and I really like the idea of that AI coming into the picture and whole technology leading from the front, the education, right? So that's pretty amazing, right? So that's about it, Shival, for today. It was lovely having you here, and thanks a lot once again.